Motors is recalling nearly 600,000 cars due to potential engine issues. Cadillac Escalades, Chevy Silverados, Suburbans, and Tahoes, plus GMC Sierras and Yukons, all from 2021 to 2024, are impacted. Those models that may have some defects in the engine that could lead to engine damage or failure.
This is the kind of story truck buyers were hoping not to hear this early. General Motors vehicles are already losing engines, and for some owners, the damage is showing up before the excitement of buying one even wears off. That is what makes this hit so hard. These are not cheap workhorses from the bargain lot. These are expensive trucks sold on toughness, reliability, and the promise that they are built to last. But now, more owners are reporting failures that sound way too serious for vehicles this new. And once you start looking at what is happening, the bigger question is impossible to ignore. Here is why this story is getting worse fast. What's happening? More and more owners started talking about engine failure in newer full-size trucks and sport utility vehicles, and that is what pushed this story into the open. These were not old trucks with huge miles and years of abuse behind them. These were newer vehicles, expensive vehicles, the kind people buy because they think they are paying for strength, long life, and fewer surprises. At first, a lot of people brushed it off. Somebody hears a complaint online, somebody else says it was bad maintenance, and before long it starts sounding like just another rumor getting passed around. But this one kept growing. More complaints showed up, then federal attention followed, then it turned into a recall story. Once that happened, people stopped laughing it off. The complaints were not about little annoyances either. Owners were talking about strange noises, rough running, loss of power, and in some cases, complete engine failure. Some people said the truck felt fine until it suddenly did not. Others described warning signs that seemed small at first, but got worse. Once the engine becomes the issue, the whole truck feels different. You're not thinking about comfort anymore. You're thinking about the one thing the whole vehicle depends on. The government side of this gave the story even more weight. In early 2025, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration started looking into reports tied to bearing failure and engine failure in this engine family. Then, in April of that same year, General Motors announced a major recall covering hundreds of thousands of vehicles in the United States. General Motors later said it had identified more than 28,000 field complaints or incidents in the United States that could be connected to this problem, and more than 14,000 of those involved reports of loss of propulsion. None of this means every truck is finished. It doesn't mean every owner is headed for disaster, but it does mean there is a real engine story here, and it became too big to shrug off. Once that happens, people start listening harder. They watch the dash more closely. They stop assuming everything is fine just because the truck still starts and drives. And once that kind of doubt gets into an owner's head, the whole ownership experience starts to change. If you've dealt with this yourself, hit like and share your story in the comments, because more owners need to see what is happening. What owners are seeing? You can live with a bad camera for a while. You can live with a buggy screen, but you don't relax when the engine becomes a question mark. The whole reason people buy these trucks is confidence. They want to tow without thinking twice. They want to drive a long distance without worrying. They want to start it up, hear it settle down, and trust that it's ready to do its job. So, when a truck starts making a strange sound, or the shifting feels off, or a warning light comes on, it lands differently. It stops feeling like some small issue and starts feeling like the beginning of something expensive. The warning pattern tied to this story included knocking or banging noises, hesitation, unusual engine speed, abnormal shifting, reduced power, and even no start conditions. That feeling gets worse because once you are dealing with a modern truck and a possible internal engine problem, nobody expects a quick, cheap answer. People start thinking about towing bills, time at the dealer, missed trips, lost work, parts delays, rental cars, and the one question nobody wants to ask on a newer vehicle: am I about to need a whole engine? A story like this also changes how people look at the truck itself. Before, it may have felt like a strong, dependable machine. After a story like this gets out, it can start feeling like a risk. Truck buyers do not just pay for hardware, They pay for peace of mind. Once that feeling cracks, the truck loses some of its value in the owner's mind even before anything breaks. There is also the used market side of this, and that matters more than a lot of people think. Even if a truck runs fine today, buyers know that a story like this can follow a vehicle for years. It changes how people shop, it changes what questions they ask, it changes how much confidence they feel about paying strong money for something that may already have a cloud hanging over it. Truck buyers talk to each other. They hear something at work, hear it again at the parts counter, then hear it again from a neighbor who knows somebody waiting on an engine. That does not prove every story is true, but it does create a feeling that something is moving under the surface. And once that feeling shows up, people stop looking at the truck as a machine and start looking at it as a question mark. If you're experienced, or you simply like straightforward machines that behave the way they should, this is probably the part that bothers you most. People can accept wear and tear, they can accept that old things break. What they do not accept easily is buying newer, paying more, and still ending up worried about core mechanical parts. That's why this story gets under people's skin. It feels backward. And once you understand that part, the next question is the one everyone starts asking. What is actually going wrong inside these engines? What's actually going wrong inside? This is not some little sensor problem. It's not being talked about like a harmless computer glitch either. The concern goes much deeper than that. The issue has been tied to internal engine parts, including the connecting rod and the crankshaft, which is why people took it seriously so quickly. What made this worse is that the explanation pointed back to how some of those parts were made during certain periods. One concern involved rod bearing damage linked to sediment in places where it should not have been, including on connecting rods and in crankshaft oil passages. Another involved crankshafts that were not quite right in terms of dimensions and surface finish. In plain language, some parts were not consistently right, and that can turn into bearing damage and eventually engine failure. You do not need to be a mechanic to understand why that matters. If internal parts are not made the way they should be, or if contamination gets where it should not be, the engine can start wearing itself out from the inside. That wear can turn into bearing damage. Bearing damage can turn into noise, loss of power, metal in the oil, and in the worst cases, complete engine failure. This also explains why the story moved so fast once the evidence started building. A lot of vehicle problems are annoying but manageable. You can live with them for a while. You can plan around them. But if the concern is internal engine damage caused by a quality problem, the risk is much harder to shrug off. You are no longer arguing about comfort or convenience. You are arguing about whether the heart of the truck is healthy. There is another part of this that matters. General Motors estimated that only a small share of the recalled population would actually contain the defect. On paper, that can make the problem sound smaller than it feels. But when the total group is huge, even a small percentage still means a lot of real people, a lot of real trucks, and a lot of real repair bills and headaches. That is why the story got so much attention. It also explains why some owners stay nervous even when their own truck is running fine. Once people hear that the issue involves deep internal parts and possible bearing damage, they stop seeing the truck as just another modern vehicle with a software quirk. They start thinking about durability, oil condition, future resale, and whether a nice smooth drive today really means much for tomorrow. And once people understood that this was a real internal engine story, the question everybody wanted answered started getting louder. Which cars this story really centers on? The main focus has been certain model year 2021 through 2024 vehicles with the 6.2-liter gasoline 8-cylinder. That includes the Cadillac Escalade and Escalade Extended Sport Utility Vehicle, the Chevrolet Silverado 1500, Suburban, and Tahoe, and the General Motors Company Sierra 1500, Yukon, and Yukon Extra Long. That is the main group sitting at the center of this story. That matters because this is not the same thing as saying every truck from the brand has the same issue, every year carries the same risk, or every engine option belongs in the same conversation. A lot of online talk blurs all of that together. But the smarter way to look at it is by engine, years, recall status, and repair history. Once you do that, the story becomes a lot clearer and a lot less wild than the internet usually makes it sound. It is also worth remembering just how large that group is. In the United States alone, the recall covered 597,630 vehicles. Worldwide, the total was even higher. So even when you narrow the story down to the actual engine and model years involved, you are still talking about a huge number of trucks and sport utility vehicles on the road. At the same time, this is also why some people kept looking a little wider than the first recall list. As the review continued, regulators said they had reports of engine bearing failure both inside and outside the original recall group. That doesn't automatically mean every vehicle outside the recall is affected. It doesn't prove a broader problem all by itself, but it does explain why people did not stop talking about it the moment the recall notice went out. This is where buyers have to stop thinking in lazy labels. It's a nice truck, it has the big engine, it runs strong. That's not enough anymore. The smarter question is which engine, which years, which recall status, and what has happened since. That is the difference between shopping with your eyes open and just trusting the badge on the hood. Once the affected group became clear, a lot of people assumed the hard part was over. Recall comes out, dealers fix it, everybody moves on. But that is not really how this story played out. Why the recall didn't fully calm people down. A lot of owners thought things would settle down once the recall came out. That is usually how people see it. The company identifies the issue, the dealer handles it, and life goes on. But that is not what made people fully relax here. The fix was not just one straight answer for every truck. Some vehicles were inspected and repaired or replaced as needed, while others went down a different service path that involved heavier oil, a new oil fill cap, a new oil filter, and an update to the owner's manual. From an owner's side, that is where some of the uneasiness came from. When the story is this serious, people want to feel like the problem was fully dealt with, not just managed well enough for now. That does not mean the inspection path was wrong. It just means a lot of owners were always going to feel more comfortable if the story ended with new hard parts instead of a service update and a note in the manual. People think about these things in a very simple way. If there is a serious internal engine problem, they want to know whether their truck truly got fixed or whether it simply passed the first test and stayed on the road. Then more questions started coming after that, and that is what kept the whole story alive. In early 2026, federal regulators opened another step in the review after receiving dozens of owner complaints alleging engine failure in vehicles that had already received the recall remedy. Once people hear that some trucks may have failed even after the fix, confidence takes another hit. There was also more support added on the service side for certain engine failures tied to the same condition. A special coverage program was put in place on some vehicles for a long period of years or up to a high mileage limit, even for later owners. On one hand, that's helpful. It can make a real difference for people who run into trouble later. But on the other hand, it also tells you how serious the situation was. That is why the recall did not fully calm people down. The problem was serious. The fix was not one simple answer for every vehicle. Questions kept coming after the recall, and the service response kept growing around the same engine story. Put all of that together, and it leaves owners with a feeling that the story is not fully settled yet. For a lot of people, that may be the most frustrating part of all. They can accept bad news if the answer is clean. What they do not like is feeling as though the answer keeps shifting while they're the ones left driving the truck, listening for noises, and hoping they're on the safe side of the line. That kind of uncertainty is hard to live with. And when a story feels unfinished, owners start paying close attention to every little sign. What owners should watch for? For owners, this is where things get practical. If the truck starts making a new knocking sound, sounding rougher than normal, hesitating, shifting strangely, revving higher than usual, losing power, or throwing a check engine light, that is not the time to brush it off. That does not mean every rough shift means the engine is done. It does mean that when a truck already has a known engine story around it, odd behavior matters more. The biggest thing is new engine noise. If the truck suddenly sounds different, especially in a way that feels deeper, heavier, or rougher than normal, do not spend weeks trying to convince yourself it is probably nothing. That kind of delay is how small warning signs turn into big headaches. When the known concern involves internal engine damage, the smarter move is to get it checked early. The second thing is overall behavior. If the shifting starts feeling strange, if the truck hesitates, if it revs higher than normal, if power drops off, or if a warning light shows up, pay attention. Again, none of those signs automatically mean the engine is finished, but when the truck is already connected to a real engine story, those are the kinds of things you do not ignore and hope away. Another thing that matters is how the truck feels over time, not just on one short drive. Sometimes people get fooled because the vehicle seems normal for a day or two, or because the noise only shows up under certain conditions. That is why it helps to pay attention to patterns. Is it getting louder? Is it showing up more often? Is the truck feeling different when warm, when cold, when pulling a load, or when sitting at idle? The third thing is history. If you already own one of these trucks, find out exactly what has been done to it. Was it included in the recall? Was it inspected only? Was the oil and cap changed? Was the engine replaced? Is there paperwork? Is there any record of earlier complaints? You want facts, not guesses. That is the starting point for understanding where your truck stands right now. And the last thing is timing. Do not wait for the situation to become dramatic. A lot of people hear a noise, see a light, or notice the truck acting a little off and hope it goes away. Maybe it does, but maybe it does not. When the known risk involves internal engine damage and loss of power, early action is simply smarter than denial. It may save you a lot of trouble later. What owners and buyers should do next? If you already own one, start with the paperwork. Check the vehicle identification number, look at the recall status, and compare that to the service history you have. You want to know where the truck actually stands, not where somebody thinks it stands. Was it part of the recall? Is the recall still open? What remedy was done? Was the engine replaced, or was it only inspected and updated? Those details matter. If you are shopping used, slow down and ask better questions. Do not stop at runs great. Do not stop at clean title. Do not stop at one owner. Ask whether it was part of the engine recall. Ask what work was done. Ask whether the engine was replaced. Ask for repair orders. Ask whether there was ever a knocking complaint, a no-start issue, or any major engine work. If the seller gets vague, that tells you something too. This is where a lot of buyers get lazy, and that is a mistake. A truck can look clean, drive fine for a short test drive, and still carry a history you need to know about before you hand over real money. On a vehicle with this kind of story behind it, details matter more than polish. Paperwork matters more than a fresh detail job. Honest answers matter more than a smooth sales pitch. It is also smart to think about how you plan to use the truck, not just whether you like the way it looks. If you need it for towing, long trips, heavy work, or daily peace of mind, then confidence matters more than getting the exact trim or color you wanted. A truck that keeps you second-guessing every sound is not really doing its job, no matter how nice it looks sitting in the driveway. And here is one more point that buyers understand. There is nothing wrong with walking away. Sometimes people get so focused on getting the exact color, exact trim, or exact deal that they ignore the bigger picture. A truck is supposed to make your life easier, not fill your head with doubt. If the answers are weak, the paperwork is thin, or the whole thing just feels off, move on. There will always be another truck. Peace of mind is worth something. The fair takeaway is pretty simple. This story does not prove every one of these trucks is headed for a blown engine. It does not prove every owner is in trouble. But it does prove that blind trust is not a smart way to shop anymore. You have to check the details, you have to ask better questions, and you have to treat warning signs like they matter. because in this case, they very clearly do. This is why people are so uneasy about this story. It's not just that engines failed, it's that they failed in vehicles people bought to avoid exactly this kind of headache. And when a problem gets big enough for a recall, a wider review, and then even more questions after the fix, people pay attention for good reason. So if you own one, check it. If you want to buy one, ask harder questions. And if you've already dealt with this problem, I would really like to hear what happened, because real owner stories usually tell you a lot more than any sales brochure ever will.